The chandeliers glittered like frozen rain above the dining room, every facet catching light that spilled across crystal glasses lined on polished tables. Laughter rose too loud, too rehearsed, filling the air with the sound of people performing wealth. Servers moved quickly through the room, their uniforms crisp and pressed, while Emily Carter carried her tray with steady hands, her plain black shoes scuffed from long shifts. Her uniform wasn't immaculate, the seams creased from too many washes, and a strand of dark hair had slipped from her ponytail. No one noticed her face, the quiet concentration in her eyes, or the way she balanced 3 glasses without a tremor. At the VIP table, a man in a tailored suit leaned back with a smirk, raising his voice just enough to cut through the music. "Don't spill the Bordeaux. You couldn't afford it." His sneer landed like a slap, followed by sharp laughter from his companions. Emily didn't react. Her fingers stayed tight on the tray's edge, her stride smooth as she placed each glass with practiced care. She did not defend herself. She did not even flinch. To the room she was invisible, just another shadow serving their night of luxury. Yet there was something in her silence, a composure that wasn't submission, but control. The guests returned to their show of power, clinking glasses, like it was part of a performance. Emily stepped back, head slightly bowed, but her eyes never wavered from their focus. Every motion carried restraint, as if she had learned long ago that energy should only be spent where it mattered. In that moment, she was overlooked by everyone who believed they understood her place. The night felt heavy, as though the air itself knew they had underestimated her. The wealthy guests at the corner table leaned close, their voices just loud enough to be heard across the room. They commented on Emily's uniform, wrinkled at the waist, and her shoes, plain black flats that had seen too many miles. One woman whispered that a restaurant like this should at least hire servers who looked polished. The laughter that followed was soft, but it landed with the same sharpness as a knife's edge. Emily carried on, her tray balanced perfectly, but the weight of their stares pressed on her shoulders. The manager caught her by the elbow near the kitchen door and hissed for her to stay away from the VIPs. He said the big spenders didn't need her tripping over them. His tone harsh and dismissive. She nodded once, keeping her face calm, and moved on without a word. To the guests, she was background noise, as unnoticed as the clink of silverware or the sweep of a busboy's rag. They performed their status in every gesture, their laughter rising like applause for themselves. Emily endured it quietly, not because she accepted it, but because she chose not to waste energy on people who measured worth in handbags and watches. In her apron pocket, tucked deep enough to stay hidden, was a small photo worn soft at the edges. It showed her years earlier, standing in fatigues beside a group of soldiers in a dusty courtyard. She never brought it out in view of others, but she touched it sometimes. A reminder that her silence was not weakness, it was patience, built from a life where dignity mattered more than the approval of those who now treated her as if she were invisible. Emily never snapped back. No matter how sharp the insult or how cruel the laugh, she carried trays through the maze of tables with the same quiet precision every time, her fingers never trembling, even when the glasses wobbled against each other. The steadiness wasn't born of fear but of habit, the kind of discipline that came from years of being trained to conserve energy until the moment it truly mattered. Her eyes moved with purpose, catching details that others ignored. A spilled drop of wine was wiped away before it could stain. A chair left crooked was nudged back into line without breaking stride. She never wasted motion, never let irritation show on her face, and never allowed herself to be baited into words she didn't need to say. That silence wasn't surrender. It was a choice. There was a gravity about her, even in small things. The way she placed a glass on a table made it clear she trusted her own balance more than the polished surface beneath it. When she shifted her weight to avoid bumping a chair, the move was fluid, precise, like she had been trained to glide instead of stumble. Those habits were not learned in a restaurant. They came from somewhere harder, where mistakes carried consequences that went beyond embarrassment. No one in the room saw it. To them, she was just another server blending into the background. But behind her calm expression and her patient silence was a woman who had carried burdens heavier than trays and endured pressures far greater than the entitled voices now laughing at her. She never announced it, but every step hinted that she was far more capable than anyone realized. The front doors slammed open and 3 masked men rushed in, their boots pounding against the polished floor. Guns swung high as shouts filled the air, each word cutting through the soft music that had played seconds before. The room exploded into chaos. Glasses shattered as guests dove beneath tables, clutching their bags and watches like lifelines. A woman screamed, her voice breaking into sobs as a man dragged her down by the arm. At the VIP table, the billionaire fumbled with his Rolex, twisting his wrist in panic while his wife clutched her purse to her chest. Emily stood in the center of the storm, a tray of empty glasses balanced against her palm. Her shoulders stayed steady, her eyes scanning the room, counting exits, counting threats. She did not drop the tray. She did not scream. She simply watched. One of the gunmen noticed her stillness and stormed over, pointing his weapon at her chest. "Get on the floor," he barked, his voice raw and ragged. The guests noticed her too. Whispers turned into hisses as eyes darted toward her. A man hiding under a table hissed that she was going to get them all shot. His voice cracked with fear but still carried disdain. A woman in a velvet dress spat that she was insane for standing there. "She needs to kneel. She's going to ruin this for all of us." Even her coworkers stared from behind overturned chairs, their faces pale, urging her to comply. Emily's grip on the tray didn't falter. Her breathing stayed even as the robber pushed closer, the barrel now inches from her face. Around here, panic turned to anger. The crowd wanted her to surrender, to prove she was small, helpless, the way they always believed she was. Their voices rose, each insult louder than the last. "She's a nobody. She's going to get us killed. She's out of her mind." The tension pressed down heavier than the chandelier lights above. Every glare pinned her like she was the true danger, not the men with guns. Her silence read as arrogance in their frightened eyes. The robber's hand twitched against the trigger, and the guests gasped, clutching each other in terror. Emily exhaled once, slow and deliberate, her eyes fixed on him. The room was suffocating with fear. Every second stretched thin, every insult sharpening the weight of what would happen next. The gun hovered inches from her face, and Emily moved. Her hand shot forward, twisting the robber's wrist in a motion so quick the crowd barely saw it. The weapon clattered to the floor as she drove her elbow into his jaw, dropping him hard. The tray never slipped. She set it on the nearest table like clearing dishes at the end of a shift. Gasps rippled through the room, a wave of disbelief that froze everyone in place. The second robber lunged, panic sharpening his movements. His gun still in his grip, Emily pivoted low, ducking under his wild swing, then snapped her leg into his stomach. He flew backward into a glass table, the shatter echoing like a gunshot. He groaned, stunned, unable to rise. The third man hesitated only a second before pulling a knife. The blade flashing under the chandelier, he lunged with a snarl, aiming for her side. Emily sidestepped with fluid precision, catching his wrist and twisting hard until the knife flipped neatly into her hand. Using his own momentum, she slammed him to the floor. The dull thud of his skull against the wood cutting through the air. 15 seconds had passed. 3 armed men were down. The room went silent, broken only by ragged breaths and the faint drip of spilled wine. Guests stared wide-eyed, their faces pale. Then the whispers began. "She dangerous. She moved like she was one of them." Someone hissed that she was a plant, that nobody normal fought like that. Fear twisted quickly into suspicion. The same contempt, now laced with unease. Emily stood over the men, her chest rising steady. The knife resting in her grip, she bent, set it carefully on a table, and straightened without a word. That was when the police stormed in. Boots pounding, radios crackling. One officer stopped cold as his eyes landed on her. His voice broke the silence. "My God. Sergeant Emily Carter. I thought you retired." All eyes turned to her. Emily met his gaze. Calm. Her voice steady and soft. "I just wanted a normal life." The weight of the words hung heavy in the air, leaving the room stunned, the truth undeniable. The robbers lay groaning on the floor as police cuffed them, their radios crackling with clipped reports. Broken glass glittered like ice across the carpet, while guests slowly pulled themselves out from under tables. Voices returned in nervous whispers, sharp and uneven, as if speaking too loudly would make what they had seen real. Some stared at Emily with wide eyes filled with awe. Others narrowed their gaze, muttering that no waitress should have moved like that. The air carried a charge, a mix of fear and disbelief that clung to the velvet drapes and the glittering chandeliers. A woman in a red dress smoothed her hair with shaking hands, whispering that Emily had to be some kind of threat herself. A man in a tux muttered that people like her always brought trouble, his face twisted more from embarrassment than fear. The same guests who had mocked her now clung to suspicion to protect their pride. The manager stormed across the room, his forehead shining with sweat. He jabbed a finger at Emily and barked that she had crossed the line, that her actions put the restaurant in danger. His voice rose high enough for the police to pause, heads turning in disbelief. He spat out the words that she was finished, that she needed to get her things and go before they were sued. The room fell quiet, every eye waiting for her to answer. Emily did not argue. She set a stack of plates gently on a side table, her movements steady, then straightened. Her silence carried more weight than his shouting. The stillness in her eyes made him falter for just a breath. But he doubled down, repeating that she was fired. For a moment, the room seemed ready to nod along, eager to see her pushed out so they would not have to face the truth of their own cowardice. Then James Colton, the billionaire who had watched everything, rose from his table. He adjusted his jacket, his voice low but carrying to every corner. He said he did not see a waitress. He saw the only person in the room who kept her nerve when it mattered. The words struck like a hammer, cutting through the haze of excuses. Faces turned pale. Glasses slipped from trembling fingers. Colton stepped closer to Emily, his presence filling the space like a tide. He extended his hand and declared that from that moment, she was his new head of security. Shock rippled across the crowd, leaving Richard's jaw slack and his wife frozen mid-breath. The same guests who had sneered now stood silent, powerless in the wake of a shift they could not undo. Emily's hand met his, firm and calm, her eyes steady. In that moment, the balance of power in the room had changed forever. By morning, the story had already escaped the four walls of the restaurant. A short clip from the security cameras leaked online, showing Emily standing calm while chaos exploded around her. The video froze on the moment the first robber hit the floor, then replayed in slow motion, her movements smooth and precise. Headlines filled with the phrase 15 seconds, and her face spread across every platform before the sun had fully risen. The sneer about Bordeaux became the internet's weapon. Someone clipped the audio, pairing it with the frame of the billionaire leaning back in his chair while Emily stood steady nearby. Within hours, it turned into a meme. Captions read things like, "This guy mocked the woman who saved his life." The post was shared millions of times. Users tagged the hedge fund's name until clients pulled out in waves, their confidence shaken not by numbers but by shame. Candace, who had laughed loudest at Emily's expense, faced her own reckoning. A video from that night captured her hissing that Emily would get them killed, her voice sharp with panic. It was stitched side by side with the moment Emily disarmed the second robber, The contrast went viral, sparking hashtags that turned her upcoming charity gala into a scandal. Sponsors withdrew. Friends stopped returning her calls. She vanished from the society pages within days. Derek, the self-styled crypto visionary, tried to ignore the storm. But a blogger with 1 million followers highlighted his mocking words. The caption read, "Crypto bro laughed while a Navy vet saved his life." Investors fled, halting his funding round midstream. His once loud social media feed went silent, the comments piling up faster than he could delete them. His girlfriend Lauren, who had sneered about Emily's shoes, locked her profile after screenshots of her remarks spread. The internet was ruthless. And for once, it was righteous. The arrogance of the wealthy turned into their own undoing. Each cruel word replayed in endless loops until reputations cracked. Clips circulated not only of Emily's fight, but of the guests cowering. Their polished images stripped bare by fear. Justice was delivered in the court of public opinion, swift and merciless. Emily did not post a word. She did not grant interviews or write statements. She walked quietly into her new role, her silence cutting louder than the noise around her. While others scrambled to repair their images, she sat at her bare desk with only a framed photo from years earlier. The world debated who she was and why she had hidden her past. But she gave no answers. She carried herself the same way she always had, steady and disciplined. The noise burned hot for weeks. But through it all, Emily remained a figure of calm. The memes, the scandals, the collapses were not her victory. They were simply the consequences of arrogance colliding with truth. She never needed to prove herself online. Her actions had already spoken, and the world had finally listened. Emily's first morning in her new office felt quieter than the restaurant ever had. The walls were lined with glass that looked out over the city, but her desk was bare, except for a small framed photo of her unit taken years ago in a dusty courtyard. She placed it carefully at the corner, angled toward her rather than the room. A reminder of where she had come from. The executives walked in one by one, their voices low, their eyes darting toward her before quickly looking away. Meetings began with clipped introductions, the air heavy with unease. Some tried too hard, offering smiles that did not reach their eyes. Others spoke stiffly, their words weighed down by nervous respect. No one laughed the way they had in the dining room that night. They chose their words carefully, aware that she had seen what they would rather forget. For the first time, silence worked in her favor. Emily listened more than she spoke. When she did, her voice was calm, measured, and direct. She did not raise it. Yet the room shifted every time she added a note or asked a question. The men who once filled boardrooms with confident chatter now paused before responding to her. They knew she would not waste words, and that made them measure their own more carefully. Her presence carried weight without her ever demanding it. Later that week, a young aide lingered after a briefing, holding a notepad tight against his chest. His voice wavered as he admitted he had been there the night of the robbery. He said he had seen how she was treated, how everyone mocked her, and how he had stayed silent. His apology came haltingly, but with sincerity. For a moment, he seemed braced for rejection. Emily looked at him with the same steady calm she had carried through every storm. She nodded once, her voice soft but certain, telling him it was done. She did not scold, did not dwell, and did not ask for more. The aide's shoulders eased, the weight lifting as he left the room. That small exchange carried more power than any headline. A quiet acknowledgement that dignity was found in action, not words. As day passed, her office became a place where people lowered their voices and chose honesty over performance. Executives deferred to her judgment in security matters. Staff members carried themselves differently in her presence, aware that excuses meant nothing. Emily never asked for loyalty, but she earned it in silence. Each step she took down the hallway reminded them of what strength looked like when it did not have to announce itself. In those moments, Emily did not feel triumphant. She felt steady, the way she had always been. Respect had not been granted. It had been earned, and now it settled around her quietly. A weight she carried with ease. She did not seek attention or applause. She only returned each day to do her work. The framed photo on her desk reminding her of the path that had shaped her into someone the world could no longer overlook. This story is for anyone who has ever been told they were not enough. Maybe you have been overlooked at work, dismissed by people who thought they were better, or treated like your presence did not matter. Emily's life shows that silence does not mean weakness. Her calm was not surrender. It was strength shaped by discipline. And it became the reason she stood tall when everyone else crumbled. Her restraint was power. In a room filled with fear and judgment, she never let anger or pride take control. Dignity was her answer. And it was that dignity that turned doubt into recognition. Respect did not come because she demanded it. It came because her actions left no other choice. That lesson belongs not just to her, but to anyone who knows what it feels like to be underestimated. So if you have carried that same weight, remember that the world cannot define your worth. Strength does not always shout. Sometimes it waits, steady and sure, until the moment it is needed. Share this story if it speaks to you. Leave a comment about a time when someone misjudged you. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. Because voices like Emily's matter, even when they choose to stay quiet.